Hello. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the interval of the octave. The octave is extremely important, not because we're going to be playing octaves in the way that we do when we play Sibelius or Paganini, but because the octave represents the basic shape or frame, if you like, of the hand. Everything we do happens within the octave or by extension out of it, and for a very good reason, which is that we play with four fingers on an instrument tuned in fifths. So the octave is absolutely fundamental for a correct shape of the hand. Now, on the subject of the shape of the hand, I prefer to start with the fourth finger. The fourth finger, like all the other fingers, needs to be curved. It needs to have that arch shape. If it has that shape, it will have its natural strength, and we won't need to add very much pressure. If it's flat, it'll have less strength, and therefore we'll have to press harder. And you might find that's not a problem at all to have a curved fourth finger. But if your hand is a little bit small, you might find that being comfortable with the first, second, and third, but not the fourth, is not healthy at all. So you will start by finding a comfortable position for a good arched fourth finger, and then work backwards. The first finger, this one, can stretch back much more easily than the fourth finger can stretch forward. So you find the very basic shape of the hand. And of course, that will be determined ultimately by the intonation. Now, the shape of the hand is important, but if the first and fourth fingers are going to be doing their job efficiently, it's important that the other fingers, the second and third, are completely neutral. We can imagine that there's some kind of power or energy flowing into the fourth finger and into the first finger, but not into the other two fingers. They're just switched off. They're neutral. They just hang there, as does the thumb. And we must also guard that there's no tension in the wrist either. So this neutrality we must constantly monitor in the early stages to make sure that we're not stiffening up the hand by energizing the fingers that aren't even involved in the playing. That will also very much affect the openness of the sound. So how much pressure do we need? Well, Geminiani tells us that we should press the fingers down as firmly as possible. I would like to be a little bit more nuanced than that and say we should press the fingers down as firmly as is necessary. And the amount of pressure will vary according to where we are in the fingerboard. So we can't measure that, of course, and then remember the statistics of our measurements. What we can do is to experiment. Now, I'm going to play the third finger on the A string without any pressure at all, and I produce that rather nasty whistling sound. Now, by increasing the pressure, I eventually get a healthy sound. What will happen now if I increase the pressure further? The answer is nothing good. The sound doesn't improve, but the finger gets tired and the hand gets stiff. So I'm going to reduce that pressure and find the optimum amount of pressure, the minimum amount in which I produce a good, clear, healthy sound. And also, it's a question of intonation, because if I fluctuate the pressure of the finger on the string, you'll hear that there is an element of pitch fluctuation as well. A little bit like a vibrato. So we need to try and avoid that pitch fluctuation. And at the beginning, we can make experiments all the time, no matter what we're playing, by seeing how much pressure is necessary in order to produce a healthy sound wherever we are along the fingerboard, and to monitor that closely. So we've set the hand, we've neutralized the fingers that aren't involved in the sound production, and we've determined how much pressure. Of course, we can say that the forefinger may need more pressure than the first because it's weaker, but the same experiment can be carried out with the fourth. And ultimately, it's our listening that determines how much pressure we need. But we need to experiment with that quite constantly for a while until we're comfortable. Now, the next question has to do with shifting. We've determined how much pressure we need, let's say in the first position. When we shift, when we move up, we need to release that pressure so that we neither get this clicking sound, such as you hear on guitars, for example, and neither do we have a very rapid shift, but just a gliding. I often think of shifting as something which just kind of floats up rather than punches its way to the next note. So releasing the pressure and then floating and replacing the pressure. Releasing, floating, and replacing the pressure. And the final point we need to consider before we start our practice is the alignment. By the alignment, I mean the way that the hand is lined up with the strings. If that's a good position, it must continue all the way up to the top. And it can only do that if my arm starts to spiral so that it carries the hand up, preserving its basic shape. Now, if I come from the first to the second, third, fourth position, there is no problem. But if I continue, what I must not do is distort the hand like that, lose the basic shape. And in order to do that, I simply bring the elbow in like that, and therefore preserve the shape of the hand. It's actually the whole arm which needs to be free right from the shoulder, and the elbow moves in to the right. Not much, of course, just as much as the hand requires. And you will see that when I know that I'm going from the first to a much higher position, the thumb starts to disappear immediately. Watch. Until it lodges itself under the neck there, making sure that that piece of skin between the base of the first finger and the thumb is always open. So those are the basic requirements, pre-requirements, if you like, for playing octaves. The rule about intonation is focus on the bass note, on the lower note, because there are two aspects, if you like, of intonation. One is the first finger in tune, and the other is the fourth finger in tune with the first. So we would do well at the beginning to divide those two. And I'm going to show you how to do that. If I'm playing a scale of B flat major, I'm going to so I'm shifting on the in a legato like that. And I'm actually listening to the shift. Listen. as I slide, as I slither up, I can actually hear the pitch um, changing, so that I know exactly where to where to get off, if you like, where to replace the the finger firmly onto the string. So I've divided the two pitches up. The second way is to do the same thing but in a slightly different formula. Like that. So the bottom finger always takes precedence. And after that, I can join the two, starting with the bottom finger and then checking the actual octave, slide the actual double stop, etc. And in that way, I can be sure that the basic intonation, the lower voice, is always in tune, and that the top one is in tune with the lower one. A very good exercise is to work up the scale in shifts from a second to a third to a fourth until I reach the octave. This will help me also understand how much the hand needs to contract in order to be in tune in the top octaves as well as the bottom. So I'm going to shift a second and then back and then a third. And I'm always listening to that slithering. So I'm not shooting from the hip, but I'm actually listening. And that way I train my ear and my hand to work together, to cooperate, until I come all the way to the top. And by that time, my hand will be quite considerably smaller than it was. But all I need to do is listen. Actually, that's all you need to do when playing the violin. Listen. It's the most important thing. Enjoy your practicing.